welcome to Southern Sense Talk Radio with your host, the radio chick, Annie Ubelis. Join Annie on Tuesdays and Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with an open chat room full of her regulars. And yes, you can even call in. Call 917-889-3675. That's 917-889-3675 to be a part of the action on the phone line. Not able to listen live? Not a problem. You can always catch Annie, the radio chick, and Southern Sense Talk Radio podcast in archives at southern-sense.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Southern Sense the right way.
Oh, thank God it's Friday. If it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, then it can be nowhere else but here on Southern Sense. Live on Blog Talk Radio, High Plains Media, SHR Media, Kinetic Hi-Fi, The Fix FM out of Charleston, South Carolina. Also broadcasting live on Spreaker, so check it out. I'm your hostess with the mostest, the radio chick, Annie, along with my debonair and my oh-so-intellectual co-host, Curtis C.S. Bennett. Good afternoon, Curtis. Are we ready?
Hey, I'm ready. And I know they're ready, so let's take it on the road.
All right. Want to welcome everyone that I see also up in the chat room and on our phone lines. Just a reminder, if you are calling into the show, please remember to place your index finger against the number 1 on your dial pad, and we know you're raising your hand to talk with us live. All right, we've got a great show lined up. Our guest who's going to be joining us after the dedication, about quarter after the hour. He goes by the name of Gern Cranium, and he's got an awesome book out called Oppression. We'll be talking with him shortly. That said, as I said before, each and every show is dedicated to a fallen hero. And let's just hope I can get this background music to play, because last time BTR was not cooperating. Today's dedication is going to go out to U.S. Army Major Ronald Milam. He was murdered on September 11th of 2001 in the terrorist attacks on the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. And this is from information that we got sent from directly from the author, and I will read portion of it. It reads, Major Ronald Milam, son of Tommy and Effie Milam, was born on August 11, 1968, in Muskogee, Oklahoma. He departed this life on September 11th of 2001 during the 9/11 attacks on the Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia. Major Milam graduated from Muskogee High School and earned his bachelor's degree from Eastern New Mexico University in 91. He was killed in the terrorist attack on the Pentagon on September 11th. On that date, a band of terrorists hijacked American Airlines Flight 77 bound for California and crashed it into the Pentagon, killing all on board and scores within the building. He was commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Army. Upon commissioning, he served as Patriot Air Defense Platoon Leader and Battery Executive Officer in Germany, Assistance Operations Officer in Korea, Battery Commander in Korea, Patriot Training Officer for Saudi Arabian Forces, and Military Assistant for the Secretary of Army, Manpower and Reserve Affairs at the Pentagon. For his sacrifice to nation, he was awarded the Legion of Merit, the Purple Heart, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Southwest Asia Bronze Star, the Cold War Certificate, and the Parachutist Badge. He served his country for 10 years prior to his murder at the hands of Islamic fascists. He was married to Jacqueline Link on January 15th of 2000. From that union, they were blessed with a daughter, My Joy Olivia, and son, Ronald Milam Jr. Both of them are now teenagers. Since the day of her husband's murder, Jacqueline's life has become remarkably focused and yet incredibly demanding. A single parent with 2 young children, she balances the challenges of maintaining a healthy living environment for them with the rigors of a career as an Air Force officer. Forgive me. Day by day, That's how now the 49-year-old White Castle, Louisiana native has been living since September 11th, 2001, when the terrorists crashed an airliner into the Pentagon, killing her husband, Ronald, and 189 others. Jacqueline De Lam was 5 months pregnant when her husband was murdered. She recalls that fateful day. When I saw the second plane fly into the Second World Trade Center tower on TV, she said, I knew it had to be intentional. So I left and immediately called Ronald and asked if he had seen what was happening in New York. He hadn't. Ronald did say that he was going to look for a television and that he would talk to me later. She hung up the phone, not knowing that Ronald, an Army major, wouldn't be able to keep that promise, and it was that last time she would ever talk to him. I went back to reading my email when Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, she said. I heard the impact, but I didn't think it was a plane because of the construction that was taking place outside my office. As she and co-workers evacuated the building, she grabbed a few items and left, still not thinking anything was wrong. Yet on her way out, she heard someone say a plane had hit the Pentagon. She got out of the building safely and immediately began searching for her husband. I looked over to the side of the Pentagon where he worked, but the flow of people heading out of the building prevented me from going in that direction, she said. I figured we would meet up once we got outside. Once outside, she and others were told to go home, and she planned on leaving once she found her husband. As she was making her way around the building to the north side where she parked, she saw a few of Ronald's co-workers, and she immediately began to ask for information about him. None had seen him. Disappointed but not distraught, she asked to let Ronald know when they saw him to meet her in the parking lot. I still didn't sense that anything bad had happened to him, she said. With the roads blocked and unable to leave, Jacqueline crossed the street to a nearby office complex and mall to make a phone call. I forgot my cell phone that morning, and I wanted to check the answering machine at home for any messages from Ronald. She anxiously dialed home. There were 15 messages from friends and family, but none from Ronald. I didn't want to think the worst, she said. I was hoping that he may only have been injured and had been taken to a hospital. She called the area hospitals to see if he had been admitted, but no one had seen him on the admissions list. Worried, she finally left the Pentagon and picked up her 15-month-old daughter, Joy, before heading home. I was hoping that we just weren't connecting and thought that as soon as I got home, I would see his Jeep in the driveway, she explained. I got home, and there was no Jeep. When someone from Ronald's office called, she was hopeful. The individual sat next to Ronald and made it out safely. But he told her Ronald wasn't in the office when the plane hit. Throughout the rest of the day, she didn't receive any other news about her husband. Still, she hoped. Although I hadn't heard from him, I still didn't want to give up hope, she said. I stayed glued to the television, hoping for some news. I even remember getting frustrated because it seemed the news focused more on the New York than on the Pentagon. That night, Jacqueline tried to eat and get some sleep, but not for herself, but for her unborn child. A day passed, then two. Finally, crews were able to get into the Pentagon to search for survivors. Still, she held out hope that Ronald might only be injured and trapped in the building. I just wanted him to be alive, she said. I never really gave up hope until I was officially notified the following Tuesday that he was killed in the attack. He wasn't in his office because he was at a 9:30 staff meeting in the E-Ring, exactly where the airplane hit the building. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Ceremony, a ceremony befitting the kind of man he was. He was a good, honest, and wonderful father and husband, Jacqueline said. It took me forever and a deployment to Korea to find him, and then he was gone. However, when she thinks back to when she first met him, a large smile creeps across her face, and her eyes light up. This may tell you something about the man, but no one tells you better than when you go onto the memorial page for Major Ronald D. Milam. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing his name correctly. And this is from the memorial page 911heroes.us. It reads, I had the pleasure of meeting Ron through my dad, at the time Chief Master Sergeant Elmo Gladden in Germany. My dad always had something to do with sports, and Ron was playing basketball. He was one of the best on the team. About golf, I got my digs in about him playing golf whenever I could. Ron was my friend. He was a good friend to me. We kept in touch for a bit when he was in El Paso, Texas, and then we lost touch. I am truly sorry for your loss. My thoughts and prayers are with you always. I am mourning the loss of a friend. His passing is really fresh for me because I found out this morning. A friend from GE told me. She and I had lost touch. She called me today on a whim to see if my number was the same. She wanted to call 911 but couldn't find my number. I kept asking myself, how did I miss this about Ron? I'm a flight attendant, and 9/11 will forever be in my memory. Any and everything 9/11 I try to keep up with. Yet I missed his passing. Today I am heartbroken for the loss of a friend. I have read every article I could find. He was accomplished in his career. So very proud of him. I'm so happy to see his beautiful wife and children. And yes, I agree, he does look like Ron. For those of us that knew him, we were truly blessed. Just saying goodbye to my friend. And this was written by his sister, Stephanie. It really makes me feel good to read all the kind words and memories of my dear brother. He was everything that all of you have said about him. I miss him so much. Sometimes it's unbearable. When I think about that horrible day of 9/11, it crushes my heart. Ron was a great person and never met a stranger. He had a great love for all of his family members. He had an unselfish heart and loved what he did. He is my hero and always will be. I am very thankful to God for blessing me with such a great brother. I know that now he is watching down on all of us. The most important thing is that Ron was a born-again Christian and was walking full force in God's path. He finished his earthly work and was ready when God called him home. I love you, brother, and I miss those conference calls that you and I and Steve and Mama used to make. Praying for the week ahead of us. You were in prayer on 9/11, and what a great feeling that is for us to know that. I can't wait until I see you again. We need to talk. Until then, rest in peace, my dear brother. Today's show is dedicated to Major Milam. It is also dedicated to all the brave men and women who dedicate their lives in service in the military to us, those that have served, who are serving, and will serve. And we also dedicate it to all the first responders out there who every day don their uniforms and protect and serve us. God bless them all.
Born in the grip of oppression, I fought for my liberty. I paid with the blood of my people. Freedom has never been free. Now my door's always open to dreamers and friends. When I'm attacked, I protect and defend, because my name is America. I stand proud and free. My name is America. Don't tread on me. I cannot be broken. I cannot be shamed. If you hurt me, I'll get stronger, and I'll rise up from the flames, and I'll always stand proud and free. I'm America, don't tread on me. America, it is my day. My strength was not taken from others. Others gave it to me. They believe in the virtues I stand for, my respect for humanity. Now I'm challenged by tyrants, who envy my power, but their vicious deeds become my finest hour, because my name is America. I stand proud and free. My name is America. Don't tread on me. I cannot be broken. I cannot be shamed. If you hurt me, I'll get stronger, and I'll rise up from the flames, and I'll always stand proud and free. I'm America, don't tread on me. America is my name. For those who need me, I'll always be here. For those who will harm me, I'll face without fear. But I'll always stand proud and free. I'm America, don't tread on me. I'm America, yes, America is my name. It's my
Todd Allen Herndon, My Name is America, and you can download that for free by going to toddallenshow.com. Check it out. We're back on Southern Sense here on Blog Talk Radio, High Plains Media, SHR Media, Kinetic Hi-Fi, the Fix FM out of Charleston, South Carolina. Oh, the heck with it. Just go to our website, click on the radio tab. It's real easy. It's the name of the show, Southern Sense. Put a dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. I'm your hostess with the mostest, the radio chick, Annie, along with my co-host, Curtis C.S. Bennett. Curtis, are we ready to rock and roll and bring our guest aboard?
Most certainly, especially now that that charade the Democrats put on the last few pages.
Oh, my goodness. I had the barf bags out. Geez, I just could not. Oh, my God. We're going to get into that. Let's welcome our guest aboard. He's the author of a fantastic book called Oppression. We welcome aboard Gern Cranium. How are you doing, Gern?
I'm well, Annie. Thanks for having me on.
And what an interesting name.
Well, I don't want to get into kind of the genesis of the name so much, Annie, other than to say that there are elements of our society that obviously don't want to see a book such as this written and to affix you or sometimes to affix your proper name to it would incite significant personal injury to some of the people who don't want to see a book such as this written. In fact, it was pulled down off of Amazon after the first 2 days after the download was significantly higher, I think, than Amazon anticipated, and I certainly don't want to entertain the hate mail that would go with such a book. Should people actually know who I am?
Well, that said, for those who are not understanding, this is a nom de plume. He's using a pseudonym as the author of this book, which deals with radical Islam. And it was a very interesting way in which you deal with progressives. My mind just went completely blank. Oh, God. I'm suffering from brain farts here. Oh, God. Oh, my God.
Well, Annie, I don't think what the greater public understands is that Islam is not a religion of peace. It's a religion of subjugation. And from that perspective, radical Islam and liberalism share a lot in common, namely the subjugation of their fellow man. Islam is not necessarily a religion per se. It's more of a control methodology that one overlays on a society in order to control the public. So it shares a commonality with radical liberalism from that perspective.
All right. I've just remembered the word because I just finally opened up my notes. You used the word ignorami. And as we were watching the Democratic convention, I actually texted that message over to you saying ignoramia. Just listening to it.
Yeah, I saw it, and it's fun. Yeah, it's a great, it's a term that if you have a collection of ignoramuses, you have ignorami. And that's kind of what we're driving at there. We've got this mass amount of human ballast in America that is so manipulatable, especially, and we think about the messaging that we receive off the television set, that what's written in textbooks now, is that imprints on the ignorami to the point where they take a position in a controversy without even knowing that they're taking a position. They assume, that everybody has a right to transform their gender simply because that's what they're told on television, and they just absorb it. Now, part of that, in order to become ignorami, the government has enacted a moronification policy to make America's citizens more ignorant and more stupid over the course of time. Hence the reason that we see increased high school dropout rates. We see increased educational failure. We see the dumbing down of education in our nation. All those methodologies are designed to try to make people into walking automatons.
Well, while I was watching the convention, listening to some of the news reports coming from the protesters, I practically fell out of my Archie Bunker chair when they were talking about the protesters outside burning the American flag. And they said one protester was either dancing or stomping on the flag, and oops, his dress caught fire.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Only in the United States of America could a protester who supposedly loves their nation, stomp on a flag that represents probably the most fair, equitable, good, and honorable nation in mankind's history. And
what was even more moronic is that on the first day of the convention, 22 protesters were arrested. Now, a group of them were also burning the American flag, and this guy that was stomping on the flag as he was burning it set his pants on fire. So the cop goes over to try to help extinguish the flames on his pants and ends up in a fisticuff with the guy he was trying to save. The guy swings at the cop trying to help him put the fire out. So guess what? Click.
Yeah,
click,
you're oppressing
bye-bye.
me. You're oppressing me. Stop the police brutality. Stop this. You're oppressing me. Yeah, I can see the conversation occurring.
I have the right to burn my own butt off. You can't make this up, folks. This is the God's honest truth. All you have to do is just simply Google the protest with the Democratic convention and look at some of the arrests. It is just too hilarious. But, one of the things I did tweet out when I was putting out the fact that you're going to be on the show last night is that I thought that you actually wrote, or they actually may have plagiarized parts of the book for their speeches. I swear, some of it was almost word for word. I'm going, no. Didn't I just read that passage in his book?
Well, it's the game plan for, and I hate to call American liberals because they're not. It's a mislabeling of what the left really intends for our nation. Really, what they ought to be called is nihilists, because they seek the regression of our society back toward the lowest common denominator for their own personal gain. And as a result, we call them liberals, but they're really not liberals. And what they espouse is not hard to figure out. You could, you probably could have laid out, like you were just saying, you probably could have laid out exactly the rhetoric that would have been espoused at the Democratic National Convention. I'm not surprised that there was no American flag on display. My guess is that should we elect mother-in-law in November, we probably will have seen the last of our national flag because of its oppressive nature to everyone.
That I thought was so idiotic. It took 3 days and Twitter lighting up, Facebook and Twitter literally lit up, excoriating them, the Democrats, for not having the American flag. It took them 3 days and they finally put a flag up. But then, if you watched last night, just about every single person had a flag last night. They go from absolutely none to going, oh, look, we're just as patriotic as the Republicans. Not.
Right, and they probably found out there was probably polling data. I'd imagine there was probably overnight polling data that showed the American people as a whole were upset at the fact that the Liberal Party, the nihilist party in America, doesn't necessarily represent our nation. So they probably had polling data on how the absence of the American flag was negatively perceived by the American population, and as a result, overnight, moved to try to impress upon the ignoramus how patriotic they were.
No, I'm urging.
Well, you know, I look at it different light. I understand what the purpose of the left is, and that's that New World Order, you know, globalization, and they don't want nationalism in this country. So, and I don't know, to me, it plays right into, you know, the way they think not to have the American flag, because first of all, they want to get away from that. They want to get away from us having pride as a nation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's, you know, Curtis, it's a great question that you ask. You know, let's assume, and I'm going to start from the assumption that the United States of America is the most fair, equitable, good, and honorable nation in mankind's history. Now, not perfect, mind you, and if you studied a little bit about systems theory, you know that the United States is a very complex system. It's going to change over time. It's going to modify itself in order to deal with its internal and external environment. It's a huge system that we have in the United States. It's a huge interconnected kind of a system, and it's going to change itself over time. However, that status quo, if we go back and we look throughout history, there has never been a nation as fair, as equitable, as honorable, and as good as the United States of America. And I challenge anyone. Show me the nation that's better than us. Show me. Where are they? Where are they? Throughout mankind's history, show them to me. So the question becomes, to the liberals, is why would you want to change that if that's our status quo? Why would you want to demolish that? What would cause you to decide to destroy the most fair, equitable, honorable, and good nation in mankind's history? And I think that that's what the American people need to wake up and smell, is that, hey, I live in a pretty good place here. You know, the American people are pretty good people, and I've traveled the world, Curtis. I've lived overseas for a decade or more. There are no people in the world as good as Americans are. And, you know, the question is what do you want to turn them into? You know, why would you want to walk back from that?
You know, you wrote this book, and what people don't realize, you did 30 years in the military, and thank you for your service. Matter of fact, you were in Desert Storm, and Curtis served during Desert Storm, to my co-host. So thank the two of you for your service. So you come from a unique perspective when you write this book. You come from a military as well as a geopolitical perspective. You lived over there where you saw Islam in its full bloom. So from the way you write the book and you describe what you see the future of America as in your book is very frightening. It's very frightening. And I may be laughing about, you know, how I could compare some of your dialogues in your book to what was going on at the Democratic Convention. But when you really think about it, it was a scary week. That what I saw up there scared the bejesus out of me.
And that's a great point you're making. You know, conservatives look at this election as our nation. This is a deciding factor for our nation. You know, the election of mother-in-law in November, to most conservatives, believe that our nation will never be the same again. That the United States, as we know it, will come to an end in November should we elect mother-in-law to office. The other perspective is they see it as a gain in personal power. So it's a personal power on the liberal side of it. It's all about maintaining personal power. On the conservative side, it's about the ending of our nation. And I think that what we don't realize is we're in the long war with Islam. Islam is a subjugation methodology. Wherever it goes, it is meant to either convert or subsume whoever's there. Most Muslims support it throughout the world, and I've traveled extensively and lived extensively in the Islamic world. They support the spread of Islam and the subjugation of other religions, almost to a person. So it's a significant threat that we're facing. Most Americans would like to delude themselves to believing Islam isn't what it is. But it's a subjugation theology that's here. The question is how do you go about combating it? Or do you just simply give in? When I look at liberals who are inherently cowards, to say that one is a liberal and one is a coward is synonymous with each other. It's almost being redundant. But if you're a liberal coward, what you prefer to do is keep your head down and pretend that Islam isn't here to collectivize you.
No, it's really funny because you define liberalism in your book, its first commandment, as "Thou shalt delude thyself," and it is delusional. To deny the exceptionalism of our nation. And then, as they say, all right, we hide our head in the sand. We've got to be nice to everyone. Islam is a peaceful religion. They really do not want to take us over and make us part of the caliphate. And the transgenders are perfectly fine. We don't have to treat them for mental illness. It's their lifestyle choice. So let them live however you see this one after another, and now you've got the transgender bathrooms in our schools, and lo and behold, and I don't know if you get this magazine, but I recommend it to a lot of anyone out there listening in. It's called World, and it's a Christian conservative magazine. But in Idaho Falls, and if anyone doesn't know where Idaho Falls is, it has it's got a gentleman out there named Sean Patrick Smith, who was arrested on July 11th for taking pictures of women in a Target fitting room. And this is right immediately after Target changed their policy to allow unisex fitting rooms. So no one sees a problem with this. And now we have North Carolina. They're saying North Carolina is losing tons of money because of the boycotts by the LGBT community, because North Carolina passed HB 2, which prohibits the using whatever bathroom you choose based upon how you feel that day. So whatever is on your birth certificate, whatever gender is on your birth certificate, that is the bathroom you use. So they passed this law, so now this huge boycott. But lo and behold, the editor of this very magazine happens to live in Asheville, North Carolina. And he has a really great editorial that said, well, Washington Post says we've lost all this money, but when I just checked around with all the businesses and everything, no one's lost money. Matter of fact, we see record number of tourism, and the Biltmore Hotel, which is the center of tourism in the area, has seen increased number of tourism. So thank you, mainstream media, for not telling the truth, but these are all things that you address in your book.
Certainly, and we've, the media's code of omerta is simply so detrimental to our nation, especially when you have an uneducated and educationally regressive population out there. They're just so imprinted upon by the media, that they think that such things that they hear are acceptable, and there is no alternative viewpoint for the ignoramus who's sitting in front of their television watching The Bachelor or Jersey Shores.
Yeah, what you find people doing is they're more excited about Pokemon Go than they are excited about who our next president will be. Who cares about Pokemon Go? I'm concerned about where our economy is going to go, what direction our nation is going to take. Will my conservative values still be upheld, or will I be forced to assimilate into a liberalistic, country? I think that is a more important question than Pokemon Go.
Well, I think as our nation burns, the ignoramus are much more content to make s'mores than they are to put the fire out.
Now, when you wrote your book, did you ever think that someone like Trump would actually be the Republican nominee?
No, I did not. I assumed looking, when I started the project 2 years ago, I assumed that we would put forth an established Republican, and there's much writing in the book about the professional political class. And when I started the book 2 years ago, I assumed the professional political class would put forth someone from the Republicans who was part of that class. Somebody who was, a Washington insider, probably with family connections. Someone like Jeb Bush was foremost in my mind in terms of who I thought the Republicans were going to try to put forward.
Now it's interesting.
So Trump, I think, is our last. I think Trump is our last gasp in terms of trying to save our nation. And I had so much heartburn with Ted Cruz's "Vote Your Conscience" the other day because I think Ted Cruz, as he's speaking at the podium, thinks to himself, "Okay, Hillary will defeat Trump, and 4 years from now, I'll run and beat Hillary." But what Cruz fails to calculate is in 4 years he may not have a nation. My guess is that Hillary's election might be our last fair election in our nation's history if she's elected.
Well, if she does make it through, I would probably say that the voting booths were probably rigged, because I don't see the conservatives, as angry as we are, staying home, even if it is Trump. But then you also have the Never Trump crowd, and what's their alternative? Gary Johnson? Oh, that's right.
Well, the problem
he gave up pot.
Well, the Never Trump crowd needs to understand is that in voting their conscience, is it more conscionable for them to knowingly and willingly cast a vote for Hillary, which is what they're doing by not voting for Trump? Is it more just, is it more right for them to see someone who's going to dismember their nation elected to office? And that's the calculus that they have to engage in, that the people who are saying never Trump won't engage in. And that's what they need to engage in. You may look at it as a lesser of two evils. You may look at it as, the worst of two candidates. But they need to understand the significant impact that the election of Hillary Clinton will cause to our nation. And if they value the nation that they live in, if they value the United States of America as the most fair, equitable, good, and honorable nation in mankind's history, it's a very easy choice. If they don't, then they're going to vote their conscience and cast a vote for someone who's going to help dismember our nation.
Well, it's funny because when I was reading your book, let me follow the thought through for a second, Kirsten. I'll let you do that. Because when I was reading your book, you had a rant in there, and when I read the rant, and I'm saying, "Oh, he must have listened to my show," because the rant sounded as if it came exactly out of my mouth. And I said that if Hillary is elected, and all those Never Trump people decide to vote in third party, I am going to blame you. You will be the cause of why our nation falls. I will place the blame squarely on your shoulders. And I'm saying, he must have listened to my show. Honestly.
Yeah, and when the time comes, and I say it repeatedly in the book in there, if you're part of the ignoramuses and you vote for mother-in-law, when the time comes, when our nation is dismembered and when death and destruction are at your doorstep, don't beg for forgiveness. Don't say, I didn't know. Don't say it's not my fault, because you will not be forgiven when the time comes.
Exactly. Curtis, go ahead.
I got a question for you. Hillary has survived the Benghazi inquiry. She survived the email fiasco. Why should we think it'll be any different if they investigate the Clinton Foundation?
Yeah, I don't think so, and I don't think it'll be any difference, Curtis. I think that Hillary, mother-in-law, knows that she has ascended so far beyond the rule of law that she's untouchable. And I don't think the American people ought to be under any illusion. Whatever Hillary is charged with, the legal system in our country will not bring her to account for it. The only way that Hillary and mother-in-law can be brought to account is for her to be defeated in November, have Trump elected, and then you investigate her and you put her in jail, because that's where she belongs. American public knows that Hillary should be in jail. There's no doubt in most Americans' minds. They're just not willing to do anything about it. They just lack the courage to face up to the professional political class and say, you're not going to rule me, you're not going to dominate me, and you're not going to break the law in my nation, and if you do, we're going to see that you're held accountable. The American public are not prepared to do that.
No, well, some of us are, but the vast majority of the media, they're running scared, absolutely scared. And then as we're listening to, Fox News and some of the people absolutely fawning over some of the other speakers and Hillary. By the way, folks, Hillary Clinton is not the first woman nominated by a political party to run for president. There happened to have been a woman from the Equal Rights Party, which was the forerunner to the Republican Party, by the name of Victoria Woodhull. And her running mate was the first black man to be nominated to run for vice president, by the name of Frederick Douglass. Look it up. It's not too hard. 2 strokes on Google will pull up the listing. Oh, man. The first time
Annie, the problem there is most Americans don't have an inquisitive enough mind to open up Google and actually look to see, to challenge what the media tells them. They simply absorb it and are subsumed. And it will lead to our downfall. It's going to lead to our national downfall.
And I just was listening to it, and every time I heard it, I'm screaming, and I'm screaming. And what am I screaming at? At the TV, at my husband, at the cats, no one else. But I'm screaming it out here. Look it up. She is not the first woman to break the glass ceiling. And, how did you like those graphics on that stage where they announced her being nominated, and the big glass ceiling and all the previous white presidents? Of course, they're all white male presidents. And all of a sudden the ceiling just breaks, and here comes Hillary's face smiling. Oh, God, I wish I was locked and loaded on that at the moment.
Well, hopefully it resonated with the American public at large. But, Annie, honestly, between us sitting here, you and I and Curtis and the people who hear us talking, I'm not optimistic. I'd like to be more optimistic, but I feel that the ignoramus population has gotten too large and is too manipulable for us to overcome the support that they give to the liberal nihilist cause in terms of destroying our nation.
Well, our chat room is filling up. And matter of fact, I see some new names in the chat room, so welcome to the new people that are joining the chat room. Our call lines are open. The call-in number is 917-889-3675. I do see some people in on the switchboard, but unless you press 1 on the keypad, I'm going to assume that you're only listening in. Otherwise, if you do press 1, I'll be happy to have you ask your question or make your comment. We're talking with author Gern Cranium, and his book is Oppression. And it is his prediction of what would happen if Hillary Clinton, as he calls her mother-in-law, is elected president. And it's a frightening fiction book, but it is hitting very, very close to home. Because in your book, you see America being divided into 3 different sections, with one large section you call Free America, actually rewriting the Constitution. And that's a subject we've also been, matter of fact, just about everything you discussed in the book have been subjects on this show, from the transgender to Common Core to liberalism to the media. All that has been here. Islam has all been discussed here. So, nothing is off limits as far as discussing the topics. But you see divide with Free America redoing the Constitution. Now, where do you stand with the Constitutional Convention? Because I know there's several different efforts going out there, and each one's tackling it in a different way.
Well, I think let me say first off that the Constitution of the United States is probably one of the 2 most foundational documents when it comes to governance that man has ever produced. Along with the Magna Carta, if you look at most nations in the world today in terms of how they've structured their societies, they've used either the Magna Carta or the U.S. Constitution as a base. As a whole, the document is very, very sound and has been proven historically valid, over the 250 years of our nation. The problem is that there are places in the Constitution where liberals have exploited a loophole in the Constitution to help destroy our nation. And that's where we start to get into things that have to be addressed. We have to assume that if you leave a door open, if you leave a crack in the cement, that liberalism will worm its way in there and begin to destroy whatever exists. And that's where, as we talk about some things that need to be couched in the Constitution, then that's the process. It has to be able to keep it from being attacked by liberals and destroyed by worming their way into it through the back door. But I think we need to get after some things. I think, when we start talking about the Constitution, I'm all for a convention of states. I don't think we'll ever get a constitutional convention at the national level. The professional politicians in America will ensure that whatever initiative is undertaken at the federal level to address the shortcomings in the Constitution, to codify some of the things that are helping to lead to our downfall, that are being exploited as weaknesses, they will ensure that every initiative at the federal level is scuttled. It will have to come from the states in terms of a convention of states in order to make our Constitution liberal-proof. I think is the way that it's going to have to take place.
Well, there's 2 groups that I support. One of them is called Convention of States, and the other one is called I Am American. A friend of mine runs that. And what they're doing is they're going state by state to each state legislature and having them pass an identical resolution, word for word. And as they go through, they're looking to get the two-third majority to have a specific resolution brought forward to Congress to be as an amendment to the Constitution. One of them being term limits and the other one being balanced budget. They're starting off with these two, and then they're going to go after other areas in which they can then strengthen the Constitution by doing these amendments. And I think it's a very clever way, because when they do this, the convention, when it is convened, will have strict rules, and that anyone violating the rules, as in your book, is evicted and replaced, so that no new resolution can be brought to the floor. Only that one resolution, and that is the one thing they vote on, and that is the one thing the states will ratify. I think it's a smart way of doing it.
And I think the only thing that I see us missing, Annie, is that with the Convention of States is there has to be someone there has to be a rallying person that serves as the focal point for it. The problem with the Convention of States is if you read Article 4 of the Constitution, it leaves very nebulous kind of guidelines for how a Convention of States is to be developed and held. And so I think there has to be some sort of impetus in the form of an extraordinary leader that's going to have to lead that charge. And part of that is the professional political class has got to be outlawed. We've got to do away with the professional politician in America because they're destroying our nation, and they're destroying our nation for their own benefit. And we never were intended to have professional politicians, but we have them. And I think the founding fathers would be vomiting from the afterlife if they gazed upon the professional politician today.
Yeah, I agree with that. We thought that we were sending them to Washington, D.C. to represent us, but instead they go to Washington, D.C. to line their own pockets. I mean, how else could Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi amass all these millions of dollars? Barney Frank, another one. All they do is go to, he and his pimp boyfriend. Real great.
Well, the quickest way, America used to be a nation where one became affluent by going into business, raising themselves up by their bootstraps, sacrificing, working 20-hour days, and making their business successful and growing their business. The business used to be the way that we made millionaires. Now, if you want to be a millionaire, you go into politics and you become part of the professional political class.
It's crazy out there.
I think we have a lot of Americans who think everybody in Washington is going there to do the work of the people, and that they have the best intentions of the country at heart when they go there. And the thing about conservatives, we know that there's an agenda to bring about the downfall of this country so they can bring about a transformation. And just working across, the aisles, I mean, how do you do that when you know the person is trying to destroy what you value so much? And I don't think a lot of people on the left understand that. They just think if we all just get along and work together for the interests of the country, it would be nice if that was the case. But these folks have an agenda to destroy everything that we believe in. So we have to, in effect, defeat them. I
agree with you, Curtis, and I think that you're exactly right, Curtis. I think America's people are inherently good, and they have a hard time coming to grasp with the idea that there are people out there on the left who are actively working to destroy their nation. And that I think they have a hard time grasping that concept that there are people who are that evil, and they're destroying our nation for their own benefit. It's the accrual of personal power at their level that they seek. They mean to have, they mean to have a collectivized society, and they mean for us to be their peons and their serfs, and they're not going to stop until they get it. And so the thing is the American people have a hard time grasping that such people exist and such people live among them.
Well, we got a comment in the chat room. I can't let this one slip up. her name is Suzette. And she writes, "Yep, you don't see an ad in the classifieds opening for professional politician, 2 or more years experience required." Thank you for the comment.
Yeah. Professional politician needed, apply inside. Yeah, Roger. Exactly right.
Well, it is so true about the professional politicians, because a group of Tea Partiers, some fellow organizers like myself, had gone to Lindsey Graham's office to confront him on certain issues. And he basically said, "I don't give a damn what you think. I am voting the way I feel I want to vote. So whatever you say isn't going to mean a single thing." The sheer arrogance he has towards the electorate and towards leaders in the conservative community, my fellow friends, is amazing. But this is not a single incident. This is basically what is permeating all through D.C.
Oh, the arrogance of the professional political class is almost it's criminal, and it's immoral. The amount of arrogance showed by the professional political class toward the common person, and the common people ought not to be under any illusions. They'll pander to you to get your vote, so they can go back to D.C. and make themselves a millionaire, but they really care very, very little about what your actual cares and wants and needs are in a society. The only way to fix the professional political class is you got to have term limits, and it has to be hard term limits, and it has to be for everyone involved in government, from the Supreme Court to the president to representatives to local government. It ought to be written in the Constitution that you get 10 years in public life, and after that you're done at any level. And that way we ensure that the people who are going forward to Washington are there to serve the people, not serve themselves.
So what do you think of the Article 5 convention?
Well, I think Curtis, you talking a convention of states?
Right.
Yeah, I think the convention of states, that needs to be, if we ever get to a convention of states, that needs to be, and Annie was talking about it earlier, that there are initiatives that are working their way up to try to get everyone on to get the same resolutions passed by all the state legislatures so that we can have a convention of states. That's got to be issue number 1 or issue number 2 behind a balanced budget. I agree with the priorities that Annie articulated earlier.
You have a lot of issues that you do cover in your book, including gun control. And I found this very interesting. I knew that it was a large number of people, but I didn't realize it was this many that you wrote in the book. And I'm asking you, this is an actual fact you used, that in Nazi Germany, Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, Red China, Cuba, and other 20th century totalitarian regimes, more than 200 million disarmed people were killed by their own governments.
Yeah, and it's disarmament is one of the first. You have to disarm the population if you're going to collectivize them. If our government intends for us to live as serfs, to live as peons, to live as minions, they're going to have to disarm us. Thank God for our founding fathers, because they understood that a tyrannical government cannot exist when you have an armed populace. But in all those countries, arms confiscation took place before the mass murder of people began. So an unarmed populace is ripe for totalitarianism. You can impose your will upon them without resistance. And I mean, if we think about it from a logical perspective, if you were a criminal, or if you meant to do harm to someone, would you do harm to someone who was armed or someone who was unarmed? It's a very easy decision.
That it is, but it doesn't stop the violence, because look, now you had this one Islamist that was using an axe and a knife on the train. It doesn't stop them that on Bastille Day from using a truck. If they want to kill us, they will always find a weapon to use. They have this other guy that these twins are looking to get freed from South Africa, and they're bringing in evidence showing why they shouldn't be freed. And one of them made himself a bomb vest. They'll find a way to kill us.
Sure, we have prisoners who kill each other every day in the penal system without a gun. And gun control is not about guns. It's about control. We probably ought not make any mistake. Gun control has nothing to do with guns or protecting children. It has to do with control of the population. And you can't collectivize, and you can't dominate, you can't subjugate a population that owns guns. It's that simple. And make the people in Washington who are crying for gun control, we ought to be under no illusion. They are protected 24/7 by armed guards. They have guns, and they're not going to give them up. They understand that in order to rule people, eventually it comes down to the rule of a gun barrel. And that's what keeps you from being subjugated, and that's what allows you to subjugate someone else.
Now, my question would be, would that Catholic...
It's a pretty simple equation when you get down to it.
Would that Catholic priest in France still be alive if a single parishioner there was armed with a firearm? Would he still have his head intact? You know, I sometimes hesitate about bringing a firearm into my church and service, but, you know, I do it quietly, discreetly, so no one knows. So if anything does happen and someone does come after my priest, at least I'll be there to defend him and the rest of the parishioners. You know, I'm sure there's others out there listening that probably do the same thing quietly and discreetly. You know, we have Christianity and Judaism under attack in the United States. They say the most horrific things against Christians and Jews, and yet do not make any criticisms against what Islam is doing to our people. So this is the hypocrisy we see on the liberals. Yeah.
Certainly to the liberal, the idea of morality and being shamed and the idea of Christianity is more oppressive to them than living under a male-dominated Islamic fascist regime. They see Christianity as more oppressive. They see morality as more oppressive than what they think they would live under in an Islamic fascist society. So, you know, part of the book there, you read a significant part about the Islamic State of the Great Lakes and how that society, what it devolves itself into. But to liberals are aiding and abetting the rise of that society without even knowing it by decrying Christian oppression and Christian morality.
This is the huge problem we find in our society. They want to break up the family. And President Johnson did that with his great Welfare Act in 1965. You break up the family, and then you can control the individuals, because now you make them part of the welfare state. You make them dependent upon government. So God doesn't mean anything. Family unity doesn't mean anything. What means the most important to them is if that welfare check is coming in the mail. You make them dependent and bowing at the altar of the government. And this is what you discuss in your book.
And certainly, it makes them. It's the easiest way to collectivize someone is you break down every structure that allows them independence. If you think about the things that make Americans independent, makes them independent people where they have no need for government, have no need for lords, have no need for masters, have no need for rulers. It's what makes them independent are things like a strong family unit, morality beget from religion, gun control, and the ability to protect themselves. All those things. Education and enlightenment, self-discipline are things that provide the individual with independence. If you want a dependent population, if you want to collectivize a population, you have to destroy all those things. And in every measure, everything that you can think of, the liberals have destroyed those things that give us independence. The military, they've tried to destroy our military. Now they're trying to destroy your police forces across the nation. They destroyed your educational system. They destroyed your family unit. They destroyed our economic system. Our economic system used to give us freedom, and now the economic system, they're moving to try to destroy our economic system, primarily through the eco-socialist program, the green eco-socialist program that's being enacted upon us. In all instances, those things that provide independence to the American people, liberals have sought its destruction because that's what prevents our collectivization to the liberals who would have us be collectivized.
Yeah, now we have someone in the chat room, I'm assuming this person happens to be a liberal, that is saying that we're moronic about defending our Christianity. No, we're not being moronic. If you look at Christianity and you look at the laws our land are based upon, you will find it all comes down to the 10 Commandments. Our entire Constitution is based upon the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. That's just common sense. You know, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.
And we ought not make any, people forget, and this is where our Constitution is so important. Our Constitution was written by men who were Christians, and they sought when they wrote the Constitution, they sought to protect the practice of Christianity because they understood that Christianity provides a moral compass to man's behavior. And without a moral compass to man's behavior, you get a chaotic society that is immoral, and freedom and chaos cannot coexist. At that point, you get anarchy. So you can't have freedom and immorality. If you're going to have freedom, you have to have morality with it, which requires religion to guide man's morality. If we look at all three of the major religions, and we look at the religious texts that are written for those religions, all three of them serve to guide man's behavior. And most of them, even in the Quran, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, they tend to agree on what moral behavior is. So if you have to have religion if you're going to have a moral society. You have to have a moral society if you're going to have freedom. Immorality and freedom cannot coexist. You can have an immoral society and no freedom. You can have that all day long. You can have an immoral society and no freedom. They call that the Soviet Union. They call that Cuba. But if you're going to have a moral society, if you're going to have a free society, you have to have morality.
I'm just making a note here. Bear with me on this. I'm seeing nasty things coming up in the chat room, and I'm asking for civility in the chat room. Please, no name calling. And if you're going to be entering something in there, please make sure you have your facts straight. Okay, thank you very much. I'm trying to play two things at the same time. Sometimes I can and sometimes I can't. Walking and chewing gum at the same time works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But you address a lot of issues, and one of them we started off with, you talked about, was the transgenderism. And this is something our society is now pushing as being normal, when it's less than 1% of the LGBT community that is transgender, and even that is approximately 1 or 2% of our society at all. So we're putting this out as it's normal for every day for your 5-year-old to decide what gender they are, and then to start doing the transgendering at such a young age, prepubescent. And this is just insanity. To this, I would call is child abuse.
Oh, certainly, and you had Wolf Heyer on your program earlier, Andy, and he's a foundation. If you really want to pay attention to what goes on in the transgender community, you really want to get educated on it, listen to what Wolf's got to tell you. And I think the research is pretty clear. The scientific research shows that most teens and younger children who espouse transgender ideations outgrow it at about the 80th percentile. So if you're supporting and aiding a teen or a young child in a transgender ideation, I would almost submit to you that you're engaging in child abuse. If you know that number, if you know that 80% of the time they're going to outgrow their transgender ideation and live a natural, healthy, normal life, the last thing that we want to do is to engage in some sort of physical alteration or reinforce it. What you want to do is get them the help that they need in order to accept who they are.
Now,
and that's where we run into it. It's a psychosocial issue as opposed to a genetic issue or a physical issue. It's a psychosocial issue by and large.
Yeah, and of the people that actually are transgenders, I think he said it's like 0.1% do have a physical, because they may have been born as a hermaphrodite. They may have actually had something physical in their genitals that said, all right, fine, in order for you to have a healthy lifestyle, this is what we'll do. And that's a minuscule amount of people. But you can't decide that...
Yeah, and it's a different issue.
Yeah, it is a completely different issue.
It's a different issue, and people will... And what you'll get to from the liberal side of the argument is you'll get a bunch of absolutes. And I'm just going to tell you out there, for everybody who can hear me, is absolutes are the tools of idiots. If you engage in absolutes, or you want to try to use an anecdote to dispel a generality, that's a tool that a simpleton uses. So if you're going to make an argument, argue from a generality and make sure that generality is nested in some sort of research. I don't think any rational person would say, here's a person who's born, with a gender identity issue, and they have to decide one way or the other. I don't think anybody argues with that. I don't think anybody argues much with abortion when it comes to rape or incest. Those are reasonable positions. and they're not absolutes. So I would tell people, if you're going to try to argue a generality with an anecdote, it's not going to hold up because it's a specific case, not a generality.
Yeah,
so generally speaking, when we're talking about transgender issues, we're generally speaking about the transgender movement as a whole, not a specific case.
Exactly. And what people don't realize is that Walt does his research. He really knows his stuff because he's lived it. He lived it.
Certainly.
And his
certainly.
book,
and there's no arguing with somebody who lives it. If there are too many people whose positions are based simply off what they've heard on TV or read on the internet. Walt has lived it. He can tell you the psychosocial issues, the psychosocial issues associated with his desire to undergo an operation in the first place. And you probably, if it's really a crux with you, I would challenge you to read Walt's postings and his account of what occurred with him, and then try to make your case for why he's wrong.
And you'll never win. Trust me. I love Walt. He and his wife are absolutely wonderful. And his website, anyone interested that want to challenge us, check out his website, which is sexchangeregret.com. And it's also walthire.com. So check it out. And you can listen to our past shows. Just go to our archives and look up our interview with him. Because there is a high rate, an extraordinary high rate of suicides in the transgender community, in the LGBT community. But that group, among all others, is the highest. Growing up, when I was young, we were told that the highest suicide rate was with dentists. Boy, that number has switched around now. But that is because of the lack of morality. This new idea that it's simply okay to decide, well, whatever the new flavor of the month is what I'm going to do. And unfortunately, this is what they're teaching our kids in school. They're not being taught the facts, and they're taking this home as gospel. And this is a shame. And I'm so glad your book is out there, because if someone reads it and thinks about actually what's happening today and compared to what's in your book, it would scare them silly.
I would challenge you, if you consider yourself liberal, I would challenge you to read the book and come back to me and tell me where you think it's wrong. I've had probably on the order of 300 liberals read my book, and almost to a person, they can't argue with the logic that's found in there in terms of the errors in the liberal reasoning mechanism. And I'm convinced after having talked to a significant number of liberals who've read the book about the only way that you can embrace the liberal agenda is to be marginally insane. You have to be delusional. You have to engage in delusion. You have to engage in illogical reasoning, and those are the hallmarks of a broken mind. So you got to be on the verge of insanity if you really are an ardent follower of liberalism. You almost have to be insane.
You have to be, but people fall for it. And you talk about weak liberal men, or as I call them, metrosexuals, in your book, and how they're afraid to stand up to bullies. You got someone pushing your kid around. Hello, that's your kid. That's your flesh and blood. Go out there and defend the kid. But no, you're afraid if you take a sock, someone's going to really knock your block off. Well, hell.
Well, better than that, teach your kid to defend himself. The problem we've got is we've got we're now a nation of weak men. We're used to alpha males roved the fruited plain. We now have beta males and gamma males, sigma males, omega males. And really, when we get right down to it, there's no creature more destructive to our nation than the liberal white female. And when you're a weak male, you're simply a liberal white female with a penis. And that's really what we get ourselves down to.
Yeah.
They're trying to do that to emasculate the military. I don't know how we're going to have a serious fighting force against armies like the Russians, or the Chinese, or whatever, North Koreans, and our men are girly men.
Yeah, I think you're right, Curtis. The army that we were in, the army of excellence that we grew up in, no longer exists. We are now... Armies reflect societies that spawn them, and so our army is reflective of the current liberal nonsense that's permeated our society, and as a result, our fighting force is not nearly the fighting force that it used to be. And I think you say you're worried about the Chinese, the Russians, what have you. I don't anticipate our military ever fighting them. In fact, our military, and if you read the book, you'll get down to it. Our military is going to have to make a decision at some point, because that's what it's all going to boil down to. And that's why it's a military political novel, is because as our society continues to denigrate and degenerate, and as more people say, I'm not going to live that way, you're going to see this continued friction between the left and the right. And eventually the military officer is going to have to make a decision on whether or not they judge our Constitution to have been abridged or abrogated. And I would tell you that most people in the military swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution without ever having known anything that's written in the Constitution. Most of them have no idea what's contained in it. So they've sworn to support and defend the Constitution or a document that they have no idea of what's written in it.
That's the hard part. Yeah, they're not keeping it because they don't know what's in it.
And they're not teaching it. And nowadays, if you want to be considered a fascist or you want to be considered a radical or a right-wing nut, the only thing you really need to do is invoke the Constitution. You start to invoke the Constitution, people say, "Oh, he's a radical. He's a wacko, that guy." So.
Well, I got to say something for the great state of South Carolina I live in. We've passed, in the state legislation, we've passed the laws that said, first it was on the college level, on the upper educational level, universities and colleges, the founding documents must be taught. And now this past year, we've also brought forward on the high school level, they must be taught. So at least the kids coming out of the state of South Carolina will know what's in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. They will know what we stand for as a nation, for the freedoms, for the liberties. And this is important. We've got to get other states to do this. We got to get the federal government out of our education, get rid of Common Core, and bring it back to the state and local level. Matter of fact, a friend of mine, Sherry Few, she started off with the South Carolina Parents Involved in Education, SCPIE. She's now taking it to the national level, USPIE, United States Parents Involved in Education. And this is her focus of her people. And unfortunately, she ran for state superintendent and school superintendent and lost. Wish she would have, because we would have gotten Common Core completely out of the state of South Carolina.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Annie. That's a great start at getting rid of Common Core because of the indoctrination that it does to our youth. Kids go home at night and think that they're doing homework when they're really being taught to take a position in a controversy without ever knowing that they're being taught to take a position in a controversy. Second part of that is we probably just go, if I was a governor today, I would fire 90% of the professors teaching at my universities. Here we have statewide employees making six-figure salaries, and they're teaching our youth to destroy their own nation. And that's got to be the second part of it. The academic indoctrinators that are found in our educational complex have got to be called to account for what they're doing to our youth and what they're doing to our nation. And right now they're getting a free pass. A lot of times because some states have tenure laws. But if you're the governor, and Scott Walker, if you hear me from my voice, from the sound of my voice, if you're listening in, getting rid of the union and getting rid of tenure is a great first step, because then you can hold the professorate in your state, the higher educators in your state, the educational administrators in your state. You can hold them accountable for the goo that they're dumping into the brains of our children.
Yeah. Now, there's a comment that was up in the chat room from someone by the name of Pendant that I stated that religion was in the Constitution. The only time religion is mentioned in the Constitution is in the First Amendment, where it guarantees the free practice of religion. That is the only time religion is mentioned in the Constitution. God is not mentioned in the Constitution. God is mentioned in the Declaration of Independence by giving us our inalienable rights from our divine being, but not in the Constitution. So the only place in the Constitution religion is mentioned is the First Amendment. And as I pull up my pocket Constitution, it says, in respecting to the establishment of religion, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And this is where people get this completely wrong. They say that there is separation of state between religion and government. Nowhere in the Constitution is that mentioned. That was a letter to bishops in Danbury, Connecticut from Thomas Jefferson. And that is what the Supreme Court based that statement upon. But what our people are getting wrong, and what the Supreme Court continually gets wrong, is that the Constitution says you cannot prohibit me expressing my religion, which means wherever I go, whether I'm in a courtroom, or whether I'm in a church, whether I'm in a schoolroom, I have the freedom from the Constitution to practice my religion as I see fit. And
that's right, Annie. And the Founding Fathers understood, you're exactly right, and the Founding Fathers understood that religion guides morality. You can't have a free nation and have it be immoral. You need in order to be free, a nation must be moral, and it must have a moral code that it operates by. Right now, we've relativized morality in our nation. We've made just about any behavior acceptable or defensible, and as a result, you're seeing immorality combined with freedom, which leads to a chaotic and breakdown in society.
And again, Pendant makes a comment that people are free to practice religion, but it can't be upheld by government, which is correct. Government cannot sponsor any one religion. And then she writes further, hence keep it out of schools. There you're wrong. Government can teach about religion, but they cannot promote a religion. So if you teach about the history of religion overall that the world has known, you can teach how Christianity was formed, how Judaism was formed, how Islam was formed, how Hinduism came to be, but you cannot teach the tenets of that religion. And this is where Common Core gets it wrong, because they have our students, they'll teach the history of Christianity and Judaism, and yet on the Islam, they will teach the pillars of Islam, which is teaching and preaching Islam, calling Muhammad the prophet, which is teaching and promoting Islam, and then having the students recite the Shahada, which is converting the students to Islam. And this is where Common Core is wrong, and the liberals in our schools are wrong.
And that's where we want to, and I'd ask Pendant, if she's out there, she's typing in, go live in an Islamic country and see how well Islam treats you. If you don't fear Islam as a religion, pack your stuff up, move to Saudi Arabia, and see what your quality of life is like. If you consider Islam the equal of Christianity, which our nation is a Christian-based nation because our founding fathers were Christians, if you think that Islam is going to treat you the same way, pack up and move there and see how it feels to live in an Islamic-dominated society. You want to talk about freedom, you have none. So,
right. That's correct. I've been there, and it's very restricted, especially with women. Very restricted.
There's an old saying that under Islam, men are men and women are cattle. So if you want to live in a society like that, pack up and move there. If you think Christianity and Islam should receive equal attention in terms of a founding philosophy for our nation, move there and live under a nation that has Islam as a founding foundation religiously.
Now, this is something you addressed in the book about the majority of Muslims practicing Islam support Sharia. And we find this, we've had several people do interviews on the street outside of mosques asking whether they support Sharia over the Constitution. David Webb did this interview for Fox News. And it's amazing how many people came out and said, no, Sharia is superior to the Constitution. And yet, last year, we had Love Thy Muslim Neighbor, a seminar at a Unitarian church where I went with my Quran in hand and then challenged the imam as he raised the Constitution above his head and said Sharia will never trump the Constitution. And yet, there are people leaving a mosque on Friday after their service saying the imam has preached that Sharia will trump the Constitution. It is superior to. So who's correct? The imam that's trying to convince me through Taqiyya and Kidman that...
Well, I think it's exactly what it is. It's deception on the imam's part, and I think everybody ought not to be under any illusion. And this is where you have to understand Islam as a religion. Islam is not a religion of peace. It's not benign. It's a religion of subjugation that's meant to control society. Islam is established, is set up so that an Islamic male can have sex with whoever he wants, whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And that's its bottom line when it comes to the implementation of Islam. Islam itself, and you'll find this out, Islam will, and we're in the long war right now in the battle with Islam here in the United States, and we probably ought not to, we'll turn away from it and try to hide our eyes and convince ourselves that we're not, but we're in the long war with Islam. Islam seeks ascendancy, especially in certain areas, and you see it now with the calls to implement Sharia in places where Muslims have the majority. And that's going to occur here. We're a democracy, and as soon as there is a preponderance of Muslims in a certain area, they're going to ask for the implementation of Sharia over the Constitution. So the rules of the Muqtars, the rules of the Imams, the rules, tafirs, hadiths, the Quranic sayings will take precedence over our judicial system and our laws that are based off of precedence. So we probably ought not to be fooling ourselves. When Muslims become a majority in a certain area, they're going to ask for the implementation of Sharia. So we ought to know that going in.
In the United States, they have already done that. There is a town outside of Dearborn where the county council has a majority now are Muslim members on the county council. They have said that Sharia law will apply. There was a town in Texas, I believe was it Houston? I forget if it was Houston or not. And they actually set up a Sharia court. Fortunately, the Texas Supreme Court kicked them out and said, no, this is not legal. But they actually existed for about 6 months. And everyone said, oh, this has nothing to do with the Muslim Brotherhood. 15 minutes Googling. In my home here in South Carolina, I tied each one of those judges to the Muslim Brotherhood. Just took me 15 minutes.
And certainly
Googling.
They are. And there's, and when it comes to Islamic subjugation, there are really two movements afoot. You have ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who have essentially merged their operation, and they seek to convert through violence. Then you have the Muslim Brotherhood, who is a global Islamic domination political entity. And the Muslim Brotherhood is here in America. It's in most of our largest cities. And they're in the Muslim Brotherhood goes through a 3-stage operation. The first one is propaganda, where they try to convince everyone Islam is a religion of peace and is not a threat, that we should be accepted as equals, that there's nothing nefarious here. Don't look, there's nothing over here. Don't look behind the curtain. There's nothing going on over here. And then the second stage is the establishment of a shadow structure. And that's where we get to Sharia courts, and that's where we get elected officials, and that's where we get infiltration of educational councils, the establishment of religious educational schools. That's all part of the second stage. And we are quickly, in most of our cities across America, finding ourselves in that second stage where the shadow structure is being put in place. And eventually, that shadow structure is going to come to the fore. That's the third stage of the Muslim Brotherhood method for achieving dominance in an area. So we're in the second stage, America. And the question is, what are you going to do about it?
Well, we've had our friend Paul Sutliff on the show. Matter of fact, he was here just this month. I had him doing a book signing at a local bookstore, and he's got 2 great books out. So if anyone wants to question whether or not this is true, check out Civilization Jihad and Stealth Jihad. And the author's Paul Sutliff. He's a nice friend of mine. Matter of fact, he's friends with Red Fox in the chat room, Kel. He writes extensively on that. And he came across the connections by accident because he went and made a donation to his college. And then a friend sent him an email and said, well, did you see that they just had this chair that involves someone connected to the Muslim Brotherhood endowed? And then he started doing a little digging and a little more digging and then started a dialogue and then he got banned from the college. And that led to him writing these 2 books because of what he uncovered. And it's scary. We have been infiltrated and we are in stage 2 of the civilization jihad.
Certainly. It's a covert Islamic insurgency that's being waged against our nation. And there are liberals who will turn away from it and simply pretend. And in the ignoramus certainly are going to hide their eyes and pretend that things aren't as they are. But we all know it. We know it. We're just not willing to accept it or do anything about it. We're not willing to fight the conversion. The question goes, because the next question is, okay, what should we do about it? Well, first thing we ought to do is declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. And anybody who's associated with the Muslim Brotherhood needs to be either deported or put in jail because they're contributing to the demise of our nation. I don't know if we're willing to do that or if we have the bravery to do that.
Well, Egypt...
I think a new administration might be up to the task. I mean, most conservatives are aware of what's going on, and that's why we have Trump as a candidate now. We don't want establishment types because they've been going along with the program as it's been going all these decades. So I think some of us are waking up.
And I think you're right, Curtis. I just hope that there's enough of us come November. And that's where this is. And I think everybody, we ought to probably really, really look at this November election as probably a landmark election in our nation's future, and we need to treat it as such. This is not just another presidential election or another congressional election or another senatorial election. This is one that's going to impact our nation for years to come. There's some old realities about decision making. If you make a low quality decision, you're going to beget a string of low quality outcomes. If you make a high quality decision, you beget a string of high quality outcomes. This November's election, if we make a low quality decision and put mother-in-law in office, we're going to suffer a significant string of low quality outcomes associated with that decision.
And that's a very scary thought. Very scary thought. Just want to remind people that they're here listening to Southern Sense here on Blog Talk Radio, High Plains Media, SHR Media, Kinetic Hi-Fi, the Fix FM, also broadcasting live on Spreaker. Our guest is Gern Cranium, and his book is Oppression. And Gern, the majority of people that listen to the show do listen to the podcast in the archives later on. So in the description, there are links that people can click on and go directly to your book. And they can either get the hard copy or download the Kindle version.
Or they can also get it or you can just order a straight PDF if you prefer a PDF. I like a PDF because you can search it, make notes on it, go back to it and reference it time and time again, carry it around on your iPad if you want to bring it up for something. So I prefer the PDF to the Kindle, but there are a lot of Kindle readers out there. You can also get it on Kindle as well.
I actually prefer the hard copy, especially if it's signed.
And the hard copies, and the good news is with the hard copies is we just went in for a second printing, so the book is now in its second printing, and you can order it off the website. It's available. We've exhausted the first printing. It got cleaned out in just under a month. So we've gone back in for another publishing, sequence of publishing. So the good news is the book is being read, and hopefully there are people who are learning from it.
Well, the funny thing is I got to the last page of the book, and you left it with a cliffhanger. And as I'm closing the book out, I'm going, oh, you dirty rat. You did not do that to me.
Well, we want you the next question should be okay, now I want to know how the war comes out. Now I want to know how it gets resolved.
Well, that means you're going to have to send me the follow-up, and then we'll have to bring you back on.
That'd be great. What you'll want to do is this book lays out the background for how we get ourselves to our next civil war, with the catalytic event being the election of mother-in-law in November. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. Is you see the backdrop to the election, how the election goes down, then how the nation divides itself, and then eventually gets us to our next civil war. And then the next book will cover how the war comes out.
Well, there's a debate going up in the... all right, go ahead, Curtis, and I want to follow up with this.
Okay. Most presidents, once they've done their time in D.C., they return to their home state. This president, I believe, has decided to make his home in Washington, D.C. Some say he wants to ensure that his legacy stays intact. What are your thoughts on that? What's motivating this guy?
Well, I think what you're going to see in relatively short order. Let's fast forward to November. Let's say the American people decide they're going to complete our national suicide and elect Hillary as their next president. My sneaky suspicion is that our current president will become the Secretary General of the United Nations. And I think that's where his next logical step will be. If you are a person who is used to power, is highly thought of by the rest of the world who seeks our demise, I think your natural progression for our current president is as Secretary General of the United Nations. Lord help us with Hillary as president and our current president as the Secretary General.
And that is a scary thought, since so much of what is going on in the United States is being affected directly by the UN. Especially with the refugee resettlement programs. We're fighting these vologs that are just dumping refugees, not telling us, who they are, if they have been screened, They haven't been screened to find out whether or not they're giving us accurate identification, or if they are who they say they are. They're not being medically screened. They're being dumped in local areas where they don't have the infrastructure to help them. The government says, we're going to give them X amount of dollars through the Vologs, but then once that money runs out after 1 year or 8 months, the locality is now responsible for housing, clothing, educating, medical care. All of that entitlement then falls on the locality, which can't handle the burden. And we're allowing the UN.
That's just Annie. That's just as far as our leadership is concerned. That's just punishment for your crimes of the past. You've oppressed people in the past, and now you're going to be called to atone for that sin.
Now, I'd like to know how we oppress these people. I just fail to understand it. We had the Barbary Wars where we first fought radical Islam, and we didn't learn from that. So now we've got a new form of Barbary War, and it's spreading across the globe, and it's really scary when you look at the attacks that are going on left and right. And now this woman comes forward that had been attacked in Germany last year, and she told the police that she was attacked by 2 German-speaking individuals because she worked with the refugees in Germany. So she's come forward a year later and said she lied about her rape, that it was by men speaking Arabic and Farsi. You're working with the very people that attacked you, and you don't expect a different outcome?
Well, and that's, liberals have a tendency to be involved in social work. Social work is dominated by liberals as opposed to conservatives. And most of them, unfortunately, serve as caretakers for people who would do us harm. And under a social justice, which is really socially unjust, under a social justice claim, I'm sure she thought, well, it's socially unjust for me to actually point the finger at the people who did this. So, when we start to relativize justice, we're headed for societal chaos, which we've come to in our nation now. Justice is socially relativized as opposed to being blind, and as a result, we accept behaviors we wouldn't otherwise accept. We tolerate criminality we wouldn't otherwise tolerate, and we accept failure where we wouldn't otherwise accept failure.
It's a crazy society we find ourselves in today, because growing up in the era that I grew up in, which I'm assuming was pretty close to you, I just won't give my age away, but I'll tell you, I've been carrying the same Constitution around in my purse since 1976, given to me by my teacher. So that gives a little hint. But I've seen a huge change in society. We no longer take responsibility for ourselves. We always find an excuse. And this is something you address in the book, too. Instead of saying that, hey, listen, I screwed up, my fault, mea culpa, say, oh, no, the Twinkies made me do it. Or the coffee was too hot. So
I laugh because there's, our need to protect our self-concept drives us to do things we wouldn't otherwise do. I'm convinced that liberals defend their need to be liberal because it's tied to their self-concept. Our self-concept doesn't allow us to admit that we suffer failure. When we do something well, we look at it and we go, boy, I did that well, and it's because I'm talented and I'm skilled. When we fail at something, we immediately look for an external enemy. It's called the enemy is out there phenomenon. And the enemy out there phenomenon is a self-concept protection mechanism that we engage in to rationalize that we're still good people even though we've done something wrong. The liberals have been very, very good about getting the American populace and the ignoramus to nest their self-concepts with liberal beliefs. Hence the reason that you hear American people say, I don't judge. Oh, I don't judge. Good people don't judge. Therefore, I don't judge. Those kind of things that you see, it's a woman's right to choose when it comes to an abortion. Those have been inculcated into people as a belief set, and they think, homosexuality is acceptable. They're only acting in accordance with their natural genetic disposition is another one that, I don't judge homosexual people. These kinds of narratives that you see that have been inculcated in people is a liberal mechanism that gets people to identify themselves with a liberal position. And once someone's self-concept is set, it's very, very difficult for them to change it.
Yeah, you cover a lot of interesting areas in the book as you explain the liberal mindset compared to a constitutional conservative. And it's a great, great book. I'm telling people that they really, really should go online and get it by going to your website, which is your name, gerncranium.com, and downloading it. It really does explain the mindset, because when I think about it, everyone has someone that's liberal in their family. We can't help who your blood is. But I ended up with a debate with a member of my family, and it was over same-sex marriage. And I said the federal government has no business defining marriage. The government has no business at all defining the word marriage. Marriage is a religious right. Civil unions, domestic unions, government they can do whatever they want with that, because it has to do with how they define whatever. Oh God, my brain must be foggy today. Benefits you may get through like Social Security, insurance, the legal definition. When you have two people wanting to say, right, fine, we're going to file our taxes as a couple, so we want you to recognize our civil union. Every single person that gets married has to get a license through their local government. That license, by law, is called a civil union. So government can say, all right, fine, civil union is between two domestic partners, be you man and woman, woman, man. We'll recognize that for legal documentation. But once you go in and define marriage, you are now telling a religion, government will now control you, will define what your rights are, and will tell you who can be a member of your religious group. And I was trying to explain this, and he could not get it through his head. And I said, same-sex couples have the same legal rights as any other couple. All you have to do is go to your local government and say, recognize our civil union. And boom, you can get their Social Security. You can go visit them in the hospital. You can then adopt children together. You can go to the moon for all I care. Just do not tell my church what its religion is. Do I make sense?
Well, certainly. And what we get ourselves back to is the definition of deviancy and the forced sanction of what some people consider deviant. We've gotten past the point of tolerance. I think in the United States today, just about every behavior is tolerated. We have tolerance in America. We have tolerance of homosexual unions. We have tolerance of just about anything that you can think of that's immoral. Immorality has become tolerated. We tolerate it. For some, that's not enough. What they look for is sanction. And American people, what people who engage in some of the immoral activities that we see in our nation, whatever they are, whatever deviant act that they want to involve themselves in. And deviance defined is a deviation from the norm. If we say that, that deviance, we now want it sanctioned. It's not enough simply to tolerate the behavior. You're now going to sanction what it is I'm doing. And I'm going to force you to sanction what it is I'm doing. And that's where we cross the line into oppressive government, is when government forces the people to sanction a behavior that they consider immoral. Not tolerate, because we're using the term incorrectly. Tolerate means to put up with. To stomach something you don't consider normal is tolerance. But we've gotten to sanction, where we're forcing people to sanction activities that they consider immoral, and that's where we've gotten into government overreach.
Absolutely. Now, we got a caller coming in from California. Let me see if I can bring them up on the line here. And we're waiting for... Come on, there we go. Area code 909, you're on the air live with Southern Sense. I'm your hostess, Annie, the radio chick, along with my co-host, Curtis, and our guest, Gern Cranium. To whom am I speaking?
This is Suzette from California, Southern California.
Hi, Suzette. How are you doing on the left coast?
Oh, we're doing okay over here. We're surviving.
The Mesoamerican Cooperative.
You have a question or comment?
I just wanted to comment on the last statement that was made as far as the sanctioning. It just seems like the leftists are promoting recognition for the as you refer to them as deviants to be recognized, and so that's how they view it. That they want to be recognized, rather than knowing that, as you were saying too, that these things were already apparent, and we've changed dramatically. I mean, we were a country that were tolerant. You did what you did. You mind your business, and we can be civil to each other, and that's what we were, and that's that. But now we've become a nation divided because there are certain groups that want to be recognized and in your face with the things that they're doing. And
you're exactly right. They want to be glorified. They want us to glorify and sanction what it is they're doing, as opposed to simply tolerating it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now this is interesting
and by doing so, go ahead.
You do address this in the book, and now we have the situation here in the United States where you do have these special classes that are now, sanctioned classes. They have it now where Loretta Lynch has now made a sanctioned class of transgenders. So if a transgender were to go into a restroom and molest a child, the child or the person molested cannot make a complaint because they are a protected class under the law per Loretta Lynch's dictate. And we have this throughout the entire society. We have no more where all men are created equal. We now have these protected classes. And it's something that you have blaringly in your book, Gern.
Yeah, we talk a lot about privilege, and liberals are privilege pimps. At every turn, they seek privilege for some recognized difference among people. Instead of everybody being the same and treated equally, they want everybody treated unequally and unfairly because we have privilege. We have privilege for homosexuals in terms of their sexual practice. We have pedophiles receive special privilege because of their deviancy. We have poor people who we excuse failure because they receive privilege by being poor. There are different classes out there of people, and America was never intended to be a class-filled society. We were never meant to be a stratified society. We were supposed to be a classless people where you could move up in society by pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Instead, we've become a society where everybody seeks privilege. We have female privilege. We have minority privilege. We have veterans privilege. Everybody is privileged in some respect. To say that there's no such thing as privilege is a misnomer.
I'm sorry. I'm sure transgender people had existed before, maybe not completely done surgically, maybe partially done quietly in their own little world. But if they're dressed like the sex that they think that they should have been, and they enter the restrooms, nobody was the wiser, and it was just accepted. It wasn't a big deal because you couldn't tell. If you questioned, you didn't walk up to the person, you didn't ask them. It was just, you just went around about your business. But the whole, we want special privileged bathroom rights, well, what for? So that you can actually be singled out now? I mean, you're talking about being equal, but you're, like you said, asking for a special privilege, so now you're being singled out. And then you claim that you're not being treated equally. Well, you made yourself that way by asking for privilege.
I want you to sanction me and give me privilege for what I've chosen to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing that 1% of the population gets so much attention.
Well, I want to go over to a little bit of a different subject. Not quite, but watching Nancy Pelosi, one of my least favorite people, she made
mine too.
She made an idiotic comment that white male conservatives are afraid because of their guns, gays, and God. Did you catch that statement, Gern?
I did not,
No.
but I'm not surprised. I mean, does that shock any of us?
So she
No, I'm not
attacks,
shocked.
she attacks conservatives because we do want to protect our Second Amendment rights that is in the Constitution. Then she goes and says that we're afraid because of gays, and yet at the Republican convention, I saw more gay speakers getting up and supporting the Republican platform than I saw gay Democrats getting up and supporting their platform. So what's our problem with having gay members within our group. There are a group called Log Cabin Republicans, too, but I don't see Log Cabin Democrats out there, do you? And then she says God.
No, and I think that, yeah, go ahead.
Well, God, she tied in with abortion. And then I'm thinking, oh, really? All right. Now, if Black Lives Matter so much, and I've said this over and over again, if Black Lives Matter so much, why aren't they out there protesting against the abortion clinics where 75% of the children murdered are black? If Black Lives Matter so much, where is their outrage in the black-on-black crimes in Detroit and Chicago and New York? Where's that outrage? So I just listened to Nancy Pelosi and just shook my head. Go ahead, Suzette.
Well, I
Yep.
didn't hear you, Curtis.
It doesn't fit the agenda. These guys are agenda driven, and they seem to have a propensity to kind of like forget about other things that are associated with their agenda. They just, for some reason, brush it off. They got to stick to what they want to say and push.
And I agree exactly, because it doesn't fit the agenda. If you're gay in America, let's just say, for example, that you're a gay male married to another gay male, or the worst thing that's going to happen to you if you bump into a conservative Christian is they're going to say, I find your behavior shameful. How would you like to come to church on Sunday? Repent for your sins. That's the most dangerous thing that will happen to you. Do you want to know what happens to gays in an Islamic society?
Yes, chop your head off.
Certainly. That may be the easiest death that you get. So, if you really think that the liberals, the worst thing that'll happen to you is you might be shamed a little bit and invited to church by a Christian conservative. If you're going to ally yourself with the liberals and the Islamic fascist movement, if you're homosexual, be prepared for what comes next.
That is an absolutely amazing thing, because when the Libyan civil war broke out, Fox News sent overseas one of their guys to broadcast, and he's broadcasting from a rooftop. They sent over Shepard Smith, and I said, oh my God, does he have himself tethered to the rooftop? Because I don't know why they sent him, of all people, over there to cover the Islamic uprising.
And there's a significant portion in the book about how homosexuals are treated by Islamofascists. So if you really want to know, what's in store for you, if you live in the Islamic state of the Great Lakes and you're homosexual, or you think you're going to go there because there's no religion, you might want to read that section of the book, because that's what it portends for you.
Yeah. Now, your book is excellent. I can't wait for the sequel to come out. When do you expect it to come out?
Well, it's probably December 2017. A book of that size that you read, with the amount of research that goes into it and the amount of background data, is usually about a 2-year endeavor. And by no means am I independently wealthy. If I were, I could just sit around and write all day. But I do have a day job, and that requires my attention as well. So it's probably December 2017, which is about where the first book concludes. So hopefully we'll pick up from there and move on with the impending war that's going to befall our nation should we elect mother-in-law.
Now, who did the cover on the book?
There's actually a company out of Alabama called LG Creatives Design, and there was a graphic artist there who did it. You'll see that there's a passage in the book about what occurs with our national monuments following the election of mother-in-law. So I thought that was an appropriate image to put on the front of the book itself.
Yeah, because on the front you've got Stalin, Hillary, Che, and Obama. And Obama, he looks exactly like a zombie. The artwork that this person did is absolutely phenomenal. There was a movie out about Christ. Was it last year or the year before? Got highly criticized because the actor that played the devil in it looked a lot like President Obama. And I'm looking at this picture and I'm going, is that the face they use, the face of that actor on here to represent President Obama? Because it looks like it. It really does. And excellent artwork.
Yeah, I think it was a TV show.
And then you included Elf.
TV show.
And I'll have you know, I did a little research when I saw the Elf emblem there. And the organization that started this back in 1977, their website is going to be taken down as of, I think it's June or July next year. The gentleman that was running it, I guess, has reached an age where he's a little too old to do this stuff anymore, so he decided to quit. But I know someone else will pick up the banner on the eco-terrorism. Oh, man. It's an excellent book, and I just looked at the clock. We're below 10 minutes left in the show. Oh, my God, the show has gone so fast. Gern, it has been a pleasure. Suzette, thank you for an excellent call and excellent comments. I cannot believe the show is almost over here. It went like...
Thank you very much for having me on the show. If I could just say real quick, the liberals say that Trump is the one that's a recruiting tool, when it's actually them, because every time we send a movie over there showing anything with gay, abortion, or any of these other things, it fuels that fire that wants to make them kill us.
Thank you so much, Suzette. Feel free to call in again.
Thank you.
All right, Gern, excellent book, and it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. Gotta definitely have you back on. You're not going to be a one-time guest. You're going to definitely come back on more often.
I will be available for you and Curtis whenever you like me.
Well,
all right.
It has been fun, and I'm so glad that we were able to cross paths. Your book is Oppression, and people can get it by going to your website, your name, Gern Cranium, or they can just look at the description in the show description and click on read the book or buy the book now. They can click on it and go straight over to the book and download it or get the hard copy. It has been a blast.
Thanks, and thanks for having me on, and God bless.
And someone mentioned the movie that I was talking about was called Son of God. Thanks, Ron. Thank you so much. We're going to be back here next week, and we've got Dave Bray. He's gone off. He's no longer with Madison Rising, but he'll be joining us on Tuesday. And then, Curtis, you've got two guests you signed up, Glow Smith and Karen Watson.
On the 5th.
Yeah, tell us about them.
Well, Karen Watson is a rising new star in the literary world. She's a true conservative, and she writes about pretty much like what I write about, the true history of this country. And Glow Smith, she is running, she was running against Corinne Brown, but she's running against whoever's in that new district that they drew up in Florida now. She'll be one.
All right, great. All right, well, we're going to be following up with a friend of mine, Coach Collins. He'll be joining us, and comedian and show host Curtis Loftus will be joining us. He's got the TV show The Flip Side. And we've got great people lined up, so I want to thank everyone for joining us here. Anything further, Curtis, that you got coming up?
Let's see. Well, I will be up in Philadelphia sometime in September for a couple of book signings up there. But I think I'm just going to be busy with elections coming up here, the early elections in August.
All right.
I work the polls.
Oh, excellent.
So
Excellent.
I encourage everybody to vote.
Yeah, and if you want to, go out there and become a poll worker, too, so that way we can make sure that at least this election is done a little bit more fairly. I tell everyone to do that. Check with your local election board, see when the training is and where they have openings. So go out there and help support a fair election system. We're down to our last 6 minutes, and I think that's just about all I have going on. But I do want to remind people, Curtis, we don't do this enough, telling people to go to your website, which is theoriginalradicals.com, so they can look at your books. You've got the history of Frederick Douglass. You've also got, oh my goodness, I am having major brain farts today. The Ram. That was your latest, the last fiction you're doing. And you said you're going to do a sequel on that. I'm looking forward to that, Curtis. Folks, also check out our website. The Sacrificial Ram. Thanks. Also check out our website, which is the name of the show, southernsense.com, and check our archives and see what we have coming up. Until then, I guess we're just about done, Curtis. got 1 minute left before we go to our takeout.
Yeah, those 2 hours went fast.
That they did. I want to thank everyone that was up in the chat room too. And Suzette just put up a link. It's Gern's website. Thank you, Suzette. Thank you so much for that. And I guess this is all. Just everyone be out there. Be safe, be healthy, be happy. And we'll see you next week. Enjoy the weekend. Good night. And I say, God bless.
We end our show with The Face of the New Democracy by the Dirty Uncles. Sit back and enjoy and have a great evening.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan. Health care plan. Health care plan.
It's gonna work, kid. You're working hard like your parents both did. Everything you earn by breaking your back, we're gonna redistribute when we make our pay tax. Hey, take it down, don't be a jerk, 'cause none deserve it better than the ones who won't work. We're gonna throw away what I hope for this road. Use your hard-earned money just to buy a new boat. Welcome to the place. Welcome to the place of the little piece outfit for you and me. Oh, welcome to the face. Welcome to the face of the new democracy. Here in the land of the not so free. Party not restrictions, brothers for our own cause. We got a pen and telephone to bypass all your laws. Political correctness will replace the Bill of Rights. Support religious freedom, bless you, praise Jesus Christ. The presence in our pockets of the store free. You cannot make a move, now that's the NSAKC. Don't expect equality, respect, and fair play. The IRS will target those who vote the wrong way. Welcome to the place. Welcome to the place of the left hypocrisy. Little piece outfit for you and me. Oh, welcome to the face. Welcome to the face of the new democracy. Here in the land of the not so free.
This is the most transparent administration in history. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.